John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the Eagles, writes a national column, FanRag Sports NFL. Set to join us here, talk some football.
Also a big fan of Glow as well, Mike Gill.
I watched all 10 episodes of The Glow.
Me too. It's in the books for me. I enjoyed it very much.
I'm surprised you went down that genre.
Well, here's the deal. I remember that vaguely back then in the 80s, and yes, that had a big effect on young Peter Thompson back in the day.
Yeah?
I mean, they used to talk about, if people would skip Saturday morning cartoons. They segued right from Saturday morning cartoons to Saturday morning, hey, these girls are wrestling. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, John McMullen used to write for, WWE Magazine there, John?
Yeah, back when it first started, years and years and years ago.
Were you?
Now it's defunct, actually.
Yeah, it's no longer. Who has a magazine any longer, right? Who's writing for magazines anymore?
Who reads? As we know by Fox Sports, who reads?
Well, according to the numbers, apparently people do.
Yeah, their traffic took a drastic descent.
What was it? 80%? An 80% drop off?
Who didn't see that coming? I am amazed. We talked a little bit about that when you were gone. I am amazed. Somebody like Jamie Horowitz is well regarded enough in that profession to get to that level and make that kind of decision. It is just a head shaker, to say the least.
It really is when you think about it. To me, and not to get off on that tangent here, but I don't know, maybe it's my computer, maybe it's not up to date or anything, but I have such a hard time just loading videos sometimes. The videos sometimes are annoying to me, more so than that's my sole purpose of going to your site, because I'm going to watch video after video. I guess they figure, look, YouTube's successful. People hang on that site all day. Why don't we try it?
Well, and I think that's it. I mean, people go to YouTube to watch videos. They're going for that reason. If you're going to a sports news site, I know the first thing I do, and my computer is up to date, the first thing I do is click out the video. I want no part of it. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the age group that they're looking for, the demographic, and maybe there are different people, I guess, that actually do seek that stuff. I have not met them, to be honest, even younger people. So I don't know where it's coming from, but obviously the data must be there for them to do such a thing, but then they'll ignore this, as you mentioned, an 80% drop immediately, not over an extended period of time where people got to sort of fashion the product and see if they liked it. It immediately.
I'm wondering, did they hear, hey, there's no more writers, so I don't want to go there? Or did they go there initially and saw no writing and decided, I'm not coming back? What made them just flock away?
Well, I would think it's more the latter, because I don't think anyone's paying attention to industry news. All that, I'm sure some people came across it, but I imagine Fox Sports had a number of loyal people who went to the website, and they woke up one day and went there and said, what the heck happened? And just didn't go back, because obviously there's a lot of competition. But, I mean, I can only speculate. I just don't think the casual fan is all that interested in industry news. So I have to think it's more the latter, and if those are the two choices.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. We are 17 days away from the opening of Eagles training camp, John. And with that, I'd like to get a little breakdown in some of the competitions that we might be looking at here at each position. When you look at Carson Wentz, he's obviously the starter at quarterback. But Nick Foles, Matt McMullen, is that a battle for you?
No, not at all. That's not a competition. Nick Foles is the backup for this team. Matt McMullen, I don't even think he's going to make the 53-man roster. If you look at what the Eagles did last year, they carried two on the regular roster and another on the practice squad. I think they're more likely to go in that direction again because that extra body is always important for special teams. And that's just the way most of the NFL kind of views things now, is to take the two quarterbacks on game day you're going to have and keep the extra guy on the practice squad. And as disaster hits, you can revisit. But there's no doubt Nick Foles is the backup quarterback of this team, and that's not even viewed as a competition.
Yeah, I would agree that Foles is the favorite to win the job there. Over at wide receiver, John, the Eagles revamped that position. We know in free agency and the draft, Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, Mac Hollins, Shelton Gibson. Do you expect the Eagles to keep 6 receivers total when you put in Jordan Matthews and Nelson Aguilar, or is there an odd man out somewhere, one of the rookies or one of the veterans?
Yeah, I mean, after off-season work, Shelton Gibson's got a lot of work to do. I'll say that because if today was cut-down day after the spring and they had to make decisions, he would have not made this football team. He did not perform well in off-season work, either the OTAs or the mini camp, and he's got a big hill to climb once training camp starts. So I think that sort of opens the door from some of the guys we've forgotten about, the Paul Turners of the world, the Bryce Craigs of the world, because Shelton, usually when you're a draft choice, you sort of have that leg up. And he did coming into off-season work, but he no longer has it after the way he performed.
Hey, John, any other wide receivers that I didn't mention? I know there's some intriguing guys that were college quarterbacks or the Triggs or the Turners of the world that you think could be a factor in the wide receiving battle.
Well, I think Greg Ward's going to make the practice squad. He was the Houston quarterback who's making the transition, more of a slot guy because of his size. And the other guy you should really keep an eye on for the 53-man roster is Marcus Johnson, because the Eagles like him a lot, and he's got the size they look for. So that would be the one name to sort of, put an asterisk next to and pay attention to, because I don't think a lot of people know who he is, but he's ahead of most of the names that you do know, with the exception of the guys who are locks to make the team. I think Marcus had a really good off season, and right now he's put himself in good position to make a run at making this roster.
Taking a look at the Eagles offense as we get ready for training camp, 17 days away. Some of the roster battles Pete and I are looking at here with John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com. John, at running back, is this the most cut and dry? I mean, LeGarrette Blount, Darren Sproles, Donnell Pumphrey, Wendell Smallwood, those are the guys?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, if somebody gets banged up or something of that nature, you have Corey Clement, the undrafted free agent from Glassboro, who is a pretty high-level undrafted free agent. So there's always a possibility he can make a run. Again, if you only keep 2 quarterbacks, that gives you another body, but it usually revolves around special teams. I can't imagine the Eagles going away from any of those 4 names. And I think they're going to keep Dylan Gordon, who I wrote about today on 973ESPN.com, as sort of he's a backup left tackle. He's an extra blocker as a tight end. They even lined him up at fullback in off-season work at times. So, I think it's going to be tough for Clement, but you never say never.
John, let's look at the tight end spot, because they'll probably keep 3 guys. Any thought that Ertz, Selleck, and Burton will be not be on the roster?
No, and I think that's the biggest slam dunk. You mentioned running back. I think tight end, it's those 3 guys. There's not really anybody pushing them. A couple younger guys, Anthony Denham's on the roster. Billy Brown is an undrafted free agent, but they didn't do enough in off-season work to even speculate. The guy you would be beating out would be Brent Selleck. It wouldn't be, obviously, Zach Ertz, but it wouldn't be Trey Burton. So Selleck is obviously aging. He's a descending player, but I just don't see anybody they have right now that can make a push to make the roster.
Offensive line will be interesting. Most positions are probably locked up, but the left guard spot, as we've chronicled in the past, John, that should be interesting. But you think they keep 9? Is that the number typically on the offensive line?
Yeah, 9 or 10. And they are so deep. I could see them keeping 10 on the offensive line, 9 on the defensive line. So it all kind of depends how things shake out. And if you don't want to sort of put a younger player on waivers, but there's certainly a lot of depth there. And the one guy I just mentioned, I think Dylan Gordon's going to make this team. So that's not a guy people think of. So when you start hashing the numbers, Alan Barber's going to make the team, Wisniewski's going to make the team. So then if Gordon's a gimme, and you're only going to keep 9, all of a sudden that gets tough for other bodies up front and some familiar names, Chance Warmack, Matt Tobin, players like that. So the Eagles, we talked about it all off season, very, very deep on the offensive line, probably going to have to cut somebody they don't necessarily want to cut.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider and national columnist for FanRagSports.com. So you talk about 10 maybe staying on the offensive line. I'll switch over to the defense, John, and start with the line. It all starts with the line play, right? And if you only think 9 guys out of those defensive linemen, who are some of the names that are vulnerable then to not being around once the final cuts are made?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of competition on the defensive line for sort of a different reason, and the fact that obviously the starters are entrenched and pretty good players. But after you get past sort of that Vinny Curry, Derek Barnett dynamic and who starts, who backs up, if it's Chris Long, especially on the interior, you don't have a lot of proven guys behind Fletcher Cox and Tim Jernigan. So that's a position you have to keep an eye on. And remember, Bo Allen is not healthy. So he's going to start this season on the PUP list most likely after tearing his pec. So that's going to open up a spot. Destiny Vallejo is a second-year player. He's gotten a lot of play in the offseason when sort of things. Fletcher Cox didn't show up originally, then he was banged up, and Tim Jernigan got banged up. So he got a lot of looks. Gabe Wright was brought in late. He's a big nose tackle type, and they need depth at that position. So it's not like the offensive line where you have good competition, but you're going to have competition on the defensive line.
And we talked yesterday a little bit about Nigel Bradham, but what I think that also does is highlight some of the linebacking battles, or who's set into the linebacking position and what kind of depth they have at linebacker, which maybe is not that much.
No, it isn't. And that's what you could say that about pretty much the whole defense. And we've talked about the Eagles are very good up front at starters. They have very good starting linebackers. They have very good starting safeties. But the depth is not there at any of the positions, including linebacker. You're counting on Joe Walker coming back from an ACL injury. You're counting on Kemu Grugier-Hill, who's a special teams player last year. You're counting on a rookie who's moving from safety at Nebraska and a linebacker, and Nate Gary. And then it's so, to sum it up, it's not good. And it's going to be difficult for this team if they have any injuries at the linebacker position, and that's maybe why Michael Kendricks is still here. And then on top of it, you have a potential suspension still looming for Nigel Bradham.
Yeah, you brought up Nate Gary. There's guys that are trying to make conversions from one position to the other, but has his instruction, or do you think he's ahead of the curve? Is he where they want him to be? I know there's been guys that have shown deficiencies or struggling to pick up the defense, I think, but is Nate Gary where they want him to be?
I think he is. I think he looked pretty good in off-season work, and I think he certainly has gained the weight they asked him to gain. So that's the first hurdle, and he's cleared it. But let's face it, that's a position, and especially for a guy like him, you have to see him with the pads on, because is he going to be able to hold up at linebacker in the NFL level? Because, hey, if you got Jason Peters bearing down on you at the second level, well, good luck with that. A 220-pound linebacker. So it remains to be seen if he's able to hold up, and we'll see pretty quickly when they get the pads on.
And, of course, as we dance around or look at the defense, I haven't even included corner in the most position that has the biggest question marks is the corner position and all the names that are there. How do you see that shaking out?
Well, yeah, I mean, they have issues at starting corner, never mind backup corner. But as far, the hope is that obviously it's Jalen Mills, it's Patrick Robinson, and it's Rasul Douglas to start. And you cross your fingers and hope that 6-month original diagnosis for Sidney Jones holds up, because you can certainly use a talent at that particular position. Of the other corners on the roster, the guy who shows up every day is Aaron Grimes, but I think he's limited by his size. I don't think he can play outside the numbers. He's strictly a slot corner. But with this type of team, and having so many issues, I mean, if you got a guy who can play in the slot and isn't necessarily versatile, you can't just shake your head at that. You have to utilize it. So I think he's a guy who should make this team. And then you have a bunch of, Aaron Grimes himself is a ex-CFL player. They have another one. It's not good at the cornerback position. So I think of all, when you see that new cut down date, and remember, it doesn't go from 90 to 75 anymore. It goes from 90 all the way down to 53. When you see that date and all those bodies hit the street, I would be stunned if the Eagles don't pick up a cornerback on waivers.
So the Eagles aren't dumb, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I mean, they see that they have deficiencies at the corner position. Do you think that then their game plan moving forward is, at least for what they have, is if we get the pressure up front, that takes the pressure off the corners, and maybe we can survive with what we have, but so the key to the Eagles defense, in your mind, is the key to the Eagles defense this upcoming season their front four pressure?
Yeah, I think that you can say that about any Jim Schwartz defense, really, because that's the engine, and he admits that. I mean, the engine of his defense is the pass rush. So it's probably more important this year than most years because they have such little depth at the cornerback position. And, right now they're crossing their fingers. We'll see if Ron Brooks gets healthy. He's coming off a serious injury. C.J. Smith got some work with the first team late in minicamp. But, I mean, if you feel comfortable with these names I'm throwing out there, you're more optimistic than me. We see how good the passing games are around in this league and the receivers are. And especially in the NFC East, when you look at Odell Beckham and Dez Bryant and even though Washington took some hits at the receiver position, they also brought in Terrell Pryor. I don't know how you can show up at those corners and expect to succeed.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a big storyline as we've kind of chronicled. But 17 days away, it's going to be starting to see if there's somebody out there, John, that they can maybe target. I know you've said Fuller from Chicago. Keep an eye on some veteran guys that could be on the market when the big. Is it going to be harder to get guys now with the one big cut down? Is it because it's going to be later in the game?
Well, I think it's going to take a lot of work. I mean, that's going to be a bad day for the personnel people. I mean, to have that many names hit the street, I think you got to be ready. You have to do your homework. You have to understand who's on the bubble, and you have to have a list ready of who you want to go get on waivers. And then, obviously, it comes down to fate because, obviously, the worst teams get the first selection, but the Eagles are pretty high on that list. Yeah. So I think ultimately they'll be able to get a player they at least have some interest in. But again, you're talking about bringing a guy in basically the week before the regular season, so he's not going to be ready to help right away. So to me, this is an issue. I think the Eagles should have been more proactive, but maybe they feel better about Sidney Jones' health than what we hear. Because if he's able to be back by late September, well, that's a significant piece you're adding to your defense.
No doubt. More football, of course, every day here on the Sports Pass. Johnny Mac's got it for us at JF McMullen. Read his national column at FanRag Sports NFL. He's writing about Marvin Lewis and Aaron Rodgers and more NFL stories at JF McMullen. His national column, FanRag Sports NFL. John, we'll do it again.
Hey, thanks, guys.